A lot of the dissatisfaction at work that people have is the idea that happiness comes to you, not through you or as you. That's a very big part of it. So I don't like my manager, I'm not getting paid enough. It usually has to do either with conditions outside of your, so-called control, or again, the perception that work is a burden. I've never seen it that way. I've been working since I was 15 years old, for my dad. I've always seen it as a chance to connect with and love other people, to learn new things, to be able to create a result that somehow improves someone else's life.
Welcome to the MINDTRX Podcast, where we explore breakthrough ideas on how to live your best life possible. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Scheele, and today we're exploring a fascinating approach to creating more freedom, fulfillment, and success in your career without necessarily changing jobs. My guest is Robin Silverman, creator of the Fullistic approach. Robin helps people who feel overwhelmed, stuck, or burdened by work discover how to create greater ease, freedom, and fun in their professional lives. Through engaging what she calls invisible forces of energy, she teaches individuals how to unlock new opportunities, improve workplace experiences, and create delightfully surprising results. In our conversation, we'll discuss why work doesn't have to feel like a burden, how consciousness influences career success, why customer experience may be the most valuable differentiator in the age of AI, and practical ways you can begin applying Fullistics in your own life right away. Let's get started. Hello, Robin. Welcome to the MINDTRX Podcast. Good to be with you again.
Oh, you too, Paul. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your work called Fullistics. That's with an F-U-L-L. I knew you originally in organizational consulting work, and at some point you and I got together. I think it was for a coffee or something, and really lit up about this new work that was coming through you, and I totally resonated with. I really get it. Could you help our audience come to understand what moved you from or within organizational work and career counseling and development to the work that you're in now?
Into Fullistics. Yeah, great question, Paul. So it actually happened, and again, I should reference that I worked for a company called Right Management, which is a corporate, entity, part of Manpower Group, okay? And so very corporate, all right, when it got down to it. And what happened was I had been there for a few years and really wanted to go on to get a higher degree, okay? Originally, they had wanted me to get an MBA, okay, which would be very typical stuff. And I said to my manager, let me just look a little further. Well, as it turns out, I'll shorten it up. At the University of St. Thomas, there was a master's in organizational work around this principle called energetics. So I called St. Thomas, okay, talked to the woman in charge. She says, yeah, the semester starts tomorrow. Just come to class. And I said, whoa, what? I haven't applied. Nothing's happening. And it was so, kind of meant to be. Well, she had been teaching it there. Her name is Ala Hiorhiadi. I don't think she's there anymore, okay? But she had been studying this. She actually came from Russia and had been using it, over there, but, again, came to this country. And it was really all around the principles that we are more than human. In other words, we know each other as humans, all right, as your listeners know. But on the other hand, there is this higher consciousness that is part of the living experience, okay? And a lot of this master's degree was in this. So my final paper, my master's thesis, was all about how to bring this into the workplace, because I realized we were only working with our thinking minds and a lot of material things like, plans and, strategies and things like that. And we were really missing the boat.
Typical MBA stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason for now, all right, because again, I left Right this year, and one of the reasons why is that AI is on the rise, all right? And AI is great. Okay. I use it, like it. There's things about it that are terrific. But there are a lot of things that AI, at least at the moment, cannot do. And a lot of that comes down into using all that we are. AI is still a machine and it only knows what it's been taught, okay, by other human beings. But so that doesn't bring in consciousness or potential or anything else. And so to really differentiate your value and who you are in the workplace and the creativity that the world needs right now, I thought it was a good time to bring Fullistics. And as you said, it's the word full. So it's all of who we are, all right, not just one piece of who we are. So thank you for differentiating that.
Yeah, and we'll get at some of the key differentiators. When I found out about a master's degree program at St. Thomas, it was 2 weeks later, I was in the first class as well. I mean, it was
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
meant to be in. You could tell right away, this is the thing. But let's talk about why so many people feel disconnected at work. The dissatisfaction levels are always being posted, how many people really don't love what they're doing. And you and I totally love what we do. I mean, the idea
Yeah.
of retiring for me, I mean, I got my
I
doctorate
know.
when I was 55. I'm going to be doing this till my last breath.
Yeah.
So the idea is there's a sense of freedom for you and me, a sense of joy for what we do. What is it that causes so many people to be disconnected and stressed?
Well, again, I think one of the reasons you and I love this so much is because we see work as an expression, right, of a lot of the higher consciousness that we are. In other words, even just you and I were quietly setting the tone before we, began our conversation with the idea that we know that we're part of something or again, the manifestation of something, maybe indefinable, in terms of how we get to it. But really, a lot of the dissatisfaction at work that people have is the idea that happiness comes to you, not through you or as you. That's a very big part of it. So I don't like my manager, I'm not getting paid enough. It usually has to do either with conditions outside of your, so-called control, or again, the perception that work is a burden. I've never seen it that way. I've been working since I was 15 years old, for my dad. I've always seen it as a chance to connect with and love other people, to learn new things, to be able to create a result that somehow improves someone else's life, that kind of thing. As a source of wonder, I learned things that I didn't expect to learn. So it was kind of like, and because I also like earning, making money. That's fun.
Sure, absolutely.
there's there's a fun to that too. So and it's also what you can do in a team that you can't do alone. I mean, there's so many things that work can be for people, but mostly it's just they see it as this pile of stuff they got to get done that's getting in the way of their so-called happiness.
Well, and there certainly is a lot to be said about that when
Mhm.
you could work all day, every
Yes.
single day, and at the end of the week, there's more on your desk than when you started it. It can be
Yeah.
disappointing. And I remember it was one of my motivations for digging a hole in my backyard. I dug a hole and I said, look, I've got a hole. I completed a project. It's right here in front of me. How wonderful. And that became
Yeah.
my water garden, which you've seen is
Yeah.
quite an
That is.
extensive project. But for me, the idea that there will be burdens and problems, and we get paid for resolving the problems that are presented to us.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there would be. The idea that my happiness is dependent on the circumstance or situation I'm in, that's a problem. And so this idea that I'm in victimhood, I'm being held down or held back. I mean, there could be a lot to that. So, what is your work helping people get that they weren't perhaps perceiving for themselves up until now?
In 3 words: freedom, ease, fun.
Nice. So how do they get from here to there, I guess is the next thing.
Yeah. Freedom, ease, and fun. In other words, I enjoy working with people who either feel like they have too much work, okay, or they're stuck in their careers, or they're overburdened, or things aren't working the way they want it. So first, I want to, before I express that, I just want to say that you're right. The whole point of any business, and I don't care what business it is, okay, it can be nonprofit, it can profit, it doesn't make a difference. And every business on this planet was created because either there was a need or to solve a problem. That's how it was created. All right, whatever. Sometimes when the problems or the need go away, the business goes away if the business doesn't evolve and do other things. I mean, there's that. But the fact of the matter is that the business of problems is the business of business. And if the problems ever go away, then there's no business. All right, so then we got to figure out a new way to live on Earth where we don't need money, we can trade with each other, or just you know what I'm saying? In other words, the way we sort of have things set up, we need business. Okay, so let's just start there. So the way you get to more ease, freedom, and fun, and let's just take them one at a time, and we can banter back and forth with it. The first one is the idea of ease, and again, that is antithetical to the idea that work is burden. Right? It's burden. So one of the easiest ways to get there, right, is to start your day that would basically say, what would make this day a little easier for me? All right. Now, when you do that and you start to look at what has come in or what could be coming in or whatever, it starts to look very, very different. Like if I, just reorganize the way things are, and get this out of the way, my day could be a little easier. Or it could be a little easier if I start with the easiest thing and get a sense of success, just get it done, pat myself on the back, say good for you, and then go on. Okay. Could be easier if we stop and meditate. Could be easier if we, phone a friend at work and just say, I've been stuck on this problem for 2 weeks. What's your opinion? People love
Nice.
their opinions.
And a couple of other things that have worked for me historically is the night before, when I go to sleep, I'll ask that question, and then my inner mind is working on it all night. So I wake up with a lot more insight into that. And there's a body worker named Milton Traeger many years ago said, what would be lighter? What would be freer? And if we have a sense there within our body, there's contraction and there's expansion, and we can feel that. What would be lighter? What would be freer? What would bring more ease? Our bodies know, our emotions know, our brain knows. But if we don't pause to ask the question, I agree with you. It's really easy to look at the same old, and say, oh, not again.
So, yeah, not again. If you hit your thumb with a hammer, the fact that your kidneys are working perfectly at that moment will not concern you. But this is also quantum physics, but it's also metaphysics. When, as you said, Paul McCartney came up, well, he didn't come up with it. One night in a dream, he heard the tune for Yesterday, the song Yesterday. Okay. And when he woke up, he didn't have lyrics, but he just wrote down, at the time he was living with Jane Asher, it was 1964, and he just wrote down something about scrambled eggs. Oh, I really, really love your legs. I mean, in other words, he just wanted to remember the melody. Then he started to run it past people to make sure that it was original and things like that. So as you say, using your dream consciousness, that's how the periodic table was created. Look it up, okay, for those who are curious. The
sewing needle Singer came up with. Same way, it
thing.
came in a dream. Yeah, he saw the spear with a hole in the end of the spear, and he said, "That's the solution to my problem." Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. So if you want to make your day a little easier, start it the night before with a question that would make it easier in the morning. The other thing is to be aware of your sentience. So whether you're clairaudient, I hear songs in my head all the time. Okay. Clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, clairvoyant. We all have different ways of internalizing or, energy coming through us.
Accessing our intuition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
that
See,
it will
AI
come to
can't do,
people different.
yeah, AI can't do that. Okay.
No.
It's not going to happen that way.
And I also think about AI as being not artificial intelligence, but augmented. So it's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
thinking partner that
Absolutely.
takes me along avenues that can bring greater insight to me, but it's the connect. Like I have a problem to solve. I've got three ways that I'm thinking of it. Give
Mhm.
me 15 more.
Right
And
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah. So then 15 more. Okay. Then again, depending upon your orientation, you could think about them, read about them, draw them. I like to get up from my desk. Personally, I have a hula hoop by my desk. I will just go and stand in hula hoop, with my arms out and everything else for about a minute. Sometimes or I'll go down and make a cup of tea in my kitchen.
Yeah, the hula
Just
hoop wouldn't work for me because I get like two turns and that's it. Drops to my ankles.
Listen, what can I say? It's just one of my favorite toys. But, it is the kind of thing, if you have a toy by your desk, you get up, take a walk, go outside, whatever, turn on some music, just by simply taking your attention off the idea that you can't get it, things come in. So again, imagine how much easier and more fun your day would be if you started it with an inspiration or a question like, gee, I got that in my sleep last night. I wonder if that would work. So the two words I like to use with Fullistics are wonder and willingness. I wonder if that would work. I wonder what would happen if I, whatever. And then just let the intuitive hits come, but then you got to follow them.
Well, yeah,
Then you
no,
got to follow.
I'd like to talk about that. Because, for example, Libby and I, my wife and I, decided that we would like to get out of tent camping
Okay.
because we go out west every year. I love the mountains, trout fishing, and so on. And we try a trailer, a little travel trailer. So we rented a few on it's like a rental situation you could get. And we knew what we didn't want really quickly. And I said, well, let's get one and we'll do a 3-year test, get a small unit, and let's see what we want to do. And if after 3 years we love it, then we'll get something bigger. Well, the 3-year mark came, and somebody called me up from an RV dealership knowing that we were looking at, and
Okay.
there it is. So now here it's sitting in my lap to do. And the first thing comes up for me is, well, really, should we right now? Well, is it? Well, I had made the
Yeah.
statement 3 years ago. Here's 3 years. It's as if the universe is saying, "Oh,
Paul, yeah,
you know you love it.
yeah,
You want to do this. This would fit the bill. What's your hesitation?"
yeah.
Because I could let the deal pass. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, I
I could
definitely.
let it pass out of a sense of doubt or, oh, maybe it's too much, or really should we do that? Or, all the second guessing that goes in. So, let's take this idea of follow through.
Mhm.
So, you decide what would make things easier. You get this download. It comes to your intuition, however it does, visual,
However, it goes.
auditory,
Whatever.
feeling, whatever. And there's a sense of knowing that it's right. But then ego or whatever else comes in. What do
Mhm.
you do in that situation?
Well, it's a beautiful question. And actually, it's probably the most important one I think the world is forcing us to answer right now, Paul. And the reason why, all right, is that every fear that every human being, any human being has ever felt has in the last 5 years, really pretty much since the pandemic, has, come to the surface. And one of the ways to access the higher conscious, and again, it's the higher part of yourself. Let's not separate it from who we are. Okay. Is that really a lot of it comes down to, I won't say addressing your fears or overcoming your fears, but really accepting, the fear, the emotion, because again, you're the brain expert. All right. In other words, I respect your PhD with your brain, but but the fact of the matter is our amygdala is designed to keep, our physical forms alive. That's a part of it. So the immediate reaction most of us have to things is no, even when it's the thing that we said that we wanted. Okay. We
Okay,
go
good.
no, we go no anyway. So part of, I think, what's happening now is that life is giving us, and work is giving this opportunity to really challenge our beliefs. In other words, and one of those beliefs, quite frankly, is, and I'm finding this with myself, is that I notice that my first reaction to almost everything is to gird myself and anticipate the worst, okay, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
anticipate the best. As you say, what if this is exactly the thing that I'm
Yeah.
looking for? So really, when it gets right down to it, I think curiosity is part of it. And what I like to say to people is don't go outside your comfort zone. Just keep expanding your comfort zone. Just keep making it bigger by saying, why do I believe what I believe? Because again, that is, as you nailed it. Okay. In other words, that's your ego. Okay. That's your ego talking. So you can either, go at it and say, why do I believe this? Maybe there is a good reason. There's a good reason to be scared. I don't know. I mean, in 3 years, maybe something changed that would make this a problem, but I don't know. But if there's no, if rationally there's nothing there, then you basically know that it is just this, kind of old imprint.
Yeah,
And
maybe the
maybe
part of
it's
the
time to
reframe,
chuck it.
yeah, part of the reframe for me could be, okay, it's come to me, I'll say yes. Now, what's the worst possible thing that could happen if I say yes,
Yes.
as opposed to, oh, I don't know if I could do this, and all of the worst possible scenarios of
Yeah.
doing the
Yeah.
wrong thing, right? So there's a lot to be said about when fear comes in. I say it's just one of our guardians.
It
Got the
is.
guardian of the open mind, the guardian of the open heart, the guardian of the open will.
Yes.
And when a fear is there, just ask it. Thank you for stopping me at this threshold, because if I cross this threshold into the unknown,
Hmm.
I am going to need to go all in, not partially in.
Right.
But it's the hero's journey idea that there's a guardian at the threshold. And if you're going to cross the threshold,
Mhm.
let's cross the threshold. Let's go and let's find out, because there's an adventure ahead. Let's find out what's there. I think also about Apple, for example,
Mhm.
their slogan was think differently.
Thank you, Emily. Mhm.
They introduced the iPod, right, as a music controller. And everybody said, why would we need that? Right. Or an iPhone. Like, why would we need a smartphone? Like, it didn't make any sense to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sometimes what's right. Let's go ahead with it and discover what comes on the journey.
On the journey. Well, I'm glad you brought up those examples, though, Paul. And the reason why, okay, is that people are turning away from some of the more addictive aspects of technology, but what we're turning into is back toward each other. So developing or just being comfortable with the consciousness and the potential and the bigger parts of who we are is really, in a sense, the safest thing you can do for yourself right now. Because again, once you're looking at your phone or whatever, you're looking, chances are good, at algorithms that are pretty much giving you what you already know, what you've already seen. It's just reinforcing it. I mean, for the most part. I mean, you can make other choices, but there it is. So, when it really, when we start to talk about, I love your guardians, okay, because I think that is so powerful in terms of helping people understand what this is. It's a guardian, it's a friend. All right, it's something to keep you safe. But then, of course, comes the question is what you is being protected here.
Right. If the guardian's only looking at my past,
Right.
then it's trying to prevent any of that from happening again in the future. But like you say, you know,
Yeah.
if my comfort zone was this and now I'm here,
Right.
it it makes sense that I should say, "Hey, guardian, I'm now living here. It's okay. Those fears aren't relevant here, but it's worth checking in on, I think. Like you're saying, it's good that it has a presence here."
That it has a point. Well, here, but all right, so let's look at it at the bigger, life picture here.
Yeah.
When we're little, we love change. Okay, we learn to walk, we learn to talk. Okay, everything is great. You go from one grade to the next. You keep getting rewarded. You get new clothes. You get new toys, new this, new that. You get to be a teenager. You learn to. Many people learn to drive. Not everybody, but people learn to drive. So you get to be independent behind the wheel of a car. And then, many people go off to college, not everybody, but at some point, probably you're going to leave home. Okay. And we don't have a problem with any of that. Or you become, my favorite one is becoming a parent. When you talk about jumping off a cliff, you absolutely don't know what you're getting into. Okay.
And if we did, would we have gone ahead?
We
Probably.
still do it.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? In other words, the biggest thing, getting married or getting partnered up or whatever you decide to do, coming out, I mean, it doesn't really matter. At some point, we make these choices and we're liberated by them. Okay, in other words, in some way, or delivered to something unknown and new, as you're pointing out. All right, so in other words, unknown and new. And then when we get there, we don't have all the parameters, and we certainly, everybody knows with a baby, ask what happens, 13, 14 years later when they start mouthing off to you. But so, we don't know what's coming down the pike. But on the other hand, we do it. And then when we get to whatever the problem is, we deal with that. So why we become so concerned with, not being willing to enjoy, take on or accept the things that we actually wanted and believe would make us happy. Put it this way: when I used to do some of my leadership development workshops, I would ask the question, how many of you actually could say that you didn't choose the job you're in now? In other words, you applied for it. Okay, you interviewed for it. They made an offer, you accepted it. You showed up for work. You're doing what they're asking you to do. So how can you in the next breath tell me you don't want to be here? Okay, in other words, where's the disconnect here? Okay, and so then it does really get down to where are you seeing the results, that sense of satisfaction. So it goes back to your first question: why do people see this at work? They don't get that sense of satisfaction.
Well, I'm wondering if at some point there's a feeling of entitlement. And what happened for me in starting my business learning strategies back in 1981, right? It's still going today just fine. The thing is that there became at a salary level and a work level and the number of weeks off level and the bank account level and the problems that were there. And after a while, I realized that I wasn't challenging myself, that I'd actually painted myself into a corner in a box that I needed to now escape from. It's a box of my creation, like you're saying. The leaders who willingly accepted the position that they're in. But what I realized is I wasn't getting out of that box. And so I applied for a PhD. Because very often, whenever I was teaching around the planet, people would say, so you've got all these learning strategies. Why don't you have a terminal degree? And I said, well, getting the master's was tough, and I'm waiting for my last child to leave college, leave for college. And sure enough, I enrolled. Now, when I enrolled, the people that were interviewing me for the few spots that were there said, we don't get it. You're a published author. You've got a successful business that most people would really love to have. You travel the world. You've got a great income. Why would you want to get a doctorate? And you know what I said? I said, I need to be forced out of the pocket that I've placed myself in. I need to read in areas that I haven't considered.
Right.
I need to breathe new life into my work. And anybody who was working with me at that time, every time I'd come back from one of the residencies, they'd say, wow, you really lit up. I was, and I am. I'm so lit up by what I do. So bringing, if you talk about a willingness and, a sense of wonder, this idea of how do we breathe into wherever we're planted right now? How do we breathe new life into this day? How do we take the mundane and make it more sacred? Even if it's just a meal that's in front of me, how can I be present and really experience the fullness that life is trying to offer me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Life isn't holding back.
Mm-mm.
I'm
Mm-mm.
holding it back for
You're holding it
whatever
back.
reason.
Well, and again, there's reasons. In other words, somebody has to run the business. The real thought was that obviously you were thinking it had to be you. But I want to just look at this in a very different sense because again, I came out of career management and people evolving themselves into new roles, particularly after they got laid off. So when you ask that question, how do you bring the sacred? How do you bring the joy? Part of that when you were talking about yourself as leader of learning strategies, okay, your face changed and all those kinds of things. Because again, a successful business does generate things that have to be done with it. Employees have to be hired and deadlines have to be met and products have to be created and billing has, in other words, things have to happen. So what usually happens to the CEOs and the ones that I used to coach is that they say it's lonely at the top. Okay. In other words, they basically, and part of that is that they get their identity from being, quote, the CEO, which I use in air quotes. Okay. And they think that the CEO basically means living on the 19th floor and looking at spreadsheets and, running quarterly numbers and whatever. Well, yeah, as you say, that's eventually that becomes soul draining. Okay. It truly does. But it's not a lot different on the second floor if all you're doing is executing what that role requires and you define yourself. It doesn't matter how you define yourself and which floor you're on. It really doesn't matter. So part of what you're saying, all right, is that sometimes we make a wish. We don't even know we made that wish. So when that person said to you, you're doing learning strategies, why don't you get a PhD? As they pointed out at the school, you didn't really need to. I mean, in other words, there was no need for that. But because learning lights you up, and as you described it, Paul, you just, your joy is just exuding. I mean, it's just radiant. So much of it is that sometimes your heart speaks and you don't even know you whispered. It was whispering. And then it presented. Now you could have ignored that person. You could have said, yeah, I'm not doing it. Too much time, too much money. I don't feel like it, whatever. And again, logically, that was true. But when you actually had to go and talk about it and you realized you were hearing yourself saying, I'm ready for more. And more is a very big part of it. So when people are unhappy, a lot of it is they don't see more. Or it's more of the same.
So this
It's more
brings
of the
in your
same.
idea of
More of the
energy
same.
awareness and possibility.
Yes, exactly.
So the freedom really starts at a place within us.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
The freedom to dream of something greater, whether it's where we are or beyond where we are right now. And then as we live each day in the energy of
Mhm.
that freedom that is ours to enjoy. I mean, we're full already of all the energy we need to create our lives as we desire it to be, bringing our awareness to it, and then the wonder of what's possible and the willingness to say yes when it comes.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
kind of get at what this whole Fullistics idea is about?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're getting it very, very well. So really, so much. I mean, listen, we all would love to be. There's a Buddhist prayer about it, may all beings be safe, may all beings be happy, may all beings be healthy, may all beings be free. You can add to that or whatever. There are so many ways in life that we can create greater safety, for one another, greater health, greater happiness, greater peace, greater freedom of expression, whatever. And we're seeing a lot of it. In other words, it's so much more okay today to be who you are in whatever body shape you are and hair color and whatever kind of things you want to put on your body and whatever, however you want to express yourself with, gender, sexuality, whatever. And then also to speak up in the workplace. In other words, people are emboldened. We've created things that have made us bigger and okay to be different, but also okay to be here together. What's interesting as we talk about this is that if we're going to apply Fullistics at work, the real question is, what can I do today? In other words, I wonder what good could come through me today. All right. And I'm willing to be a vehicle for that, both for myself and for, those whose lives touch mine.
Nice. And certainly anytime I'm with a client
Yeah.
and I'm preparing for
Hmm.
that meeting,
Yeah.
it's just about being open. There's a prayer that King Solomon used. It said, Lord, give me what I need to serve your people.
Yeah.
And according to the story, God went, nobody's ever asked that. So just like, they're always asking for themselves. So I think, certainly my opening prayer each day is about the gratefulness that I have, but then that prayer by Solomon as well. So I feel like I'm always in the right place at the right time to successfully engage in the right activity. That's just how life goes for me. Now, for those who are here and really listening for what's a practical tip for how I can live today and tomorrow using some of the principles that you've come to recognize are so helpful to those you work with.
Yeah. So one of them is to understand, and you can ask your manager or just, again, if you're running the business or whatever, what is the result that you're creating? Okay, that becomes part of it. And why is it important? So I'll give two very quick examples of this. I was working in a leadership class with a woman who worked in a factory where they created a chemical that kept operating rooms from safe from bacteria so the patient wouldn't get staph infections. So I said to her, and she says, I can't get people engaged around it. And I said, what does it do? She says, well, if they use our chemical, people can go home, without infection. I said, so basically you're saving lives. I said, how many applications are in each barrel? And she said, I don't know, 500, whatever. And I said, so basically every time another barrel goes out the door, you just saved another 500 lives. Okay. Or money, or, in other words, because they're not suing the hospital and whatever. Well, it completely changed the way they saw their work. They weren't creating the chemical. So one thing you can do is to understand the impact of what you're doing. When I think of you, Paul, and learning strategies and all the lives that you've changed since 1981, okay, in terms of the questions you've gotten people to ask, more and bigger is part of the evolution of all consciousness. We are moving towards samadhi, toward awakening, toward awareness. So we do need to keep expanding, and you've played a huge part in that. So part of that is looking at your work and understanding, what's the big picture. That's number one. Number two is when you go to a meeting, okay, I like to use mudras because they sort of get me into my body. And I like to take my three fingers and basically create little W's, okay? And I'll lay them in my lap to remind myself to sort of wonder what is in front of me. So rather than jumping into the meeting and talking, other than to say hello and be glad to see everybody, I'm wondering what is playing out in front of me. Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I like
That,
that.
yeah, it gives me an opportunity to really be aware of what my colleagues are doing. I'm able to call them and their ideas out by name because usually people are playing mental ping pong with each other. They're talking at each other and over each other. And I can become the connector. All right, when I'm doing that, I'll say, Bob, your idea just connected with Muhammad's and it's terrific. Have you ever thought of it this way? Then all of a sudden I say, now how do we turn that into the solution that's the reason for this meeting? All right, and then it becomes it's almost like orchestrating something or cooking a meal. In other words, you're taking what's in the pantry and, building something beautiful with it. So that's fun to do. So I'll do W's. And then when I get into the willingness part, once I've done the wonders, I just open my hands with my palms up, lay them in my lap. All right. And again, just try to stay very present. So that's something people can do. The other we talked about earlier, which is if you want to tap into the field of consciousness, you can either do what you did when that person whispered in your ear and said, so why don't you get a PhD? Which is say, what signs and hints is my heart putting right in my face? I have a very funny story to end this with that. Or you can do the thing about write the question, speak it out loud before you go to bed, before you get in the shower, whatever. So the funny story is one of my friends hated her job. And she kept saying, should I get a new job? Should I get a new job? And I said, Kathy, you really ought to get a new job. And one night she had this dream where an angel came, closed the Venetian blinds, and spray painted in red, Kathy, get a new job. So she called me the next day and she says, what do you think it means? I said, oh,
show me a sign, please. Just give me a sign.
I said to Kathy, I go, how much more of a sign do you need? It's like, and so
what do you think this means? That's great.
So that's why I would say to people, what signs are you ignoring? What questions are you not asking? What presents are you not offering? Okay, what result are you not loving? And if you can bring any or all of those into the workplace, believe me, it's going to feel real different to go to work tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Real different.
Wow. That was drop the mic and walk off the stage. You nailed it. I love that. But and at the same moment, none of what you're saying should feel super complex, because if you understand this concept called Fullistics, you have this energy that is fully imbued in you, through you, as you, part of the universal fabric that brought you here. It gives you the breath you breathe. It gives you the beating of your heart. It's here. You're part of an expansion that the universe is undergoing. And either we're contracting and trying to resist it, or expanding with it. And I really love what you're doing with all of this. Congratulations, Robin. And so good to be with you today.
And you as well. And you as well. So thank you for the opportunity. And again, what I would say to everybody is go be all of you. Mm-hmm. And that all, you have no idea how expansive that can be.
Yay, you.
Yeah. So
thank you so much. Peace and blessings.
Thank you, Paul. You too.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Robin Silverman. Robin shared powerful insights about transforming the way we experience work by engaging higher levels of awareness, possibility, and energy. Her Fullistic approach reminds us that many opportunities exist around us. We simply need to become more aware of them and align ourselves with the possibilities available. To connect with Robin, visit her website at www.fullistic.com. Now, I'd like to explore several paraliminal audio sessions that can help you apply these ideas in your own life. Whether you're looking to create more freedom, attract new opportunities, improve workplace relationships, or develop a greater sense of possibility, these tools can help reduce internal resistance and support the positive changes you want to make. Let's get started. Welcome back. This is the follow-on to my conversation with Robin Silverman, where we were talking about her concept called Fullistics, this notion that we are full of all of the energy of the universe, and we can use it to really open up our lives in powerful ways. Now, I look at 4 different themes that came through in our work together. One is this idea of being able to transform our work life, whatever we may be doing, either in a job, at home, whatever it might be. How do we have the experience of freedom and possibility and expansion that she described? Secondly is, how do we engage the invisible sources of energy? You could tell how absolutely certain she is about all of that. And certainly in my 50 years of being in the human potential development field, I've seen it working. And how can you recognize on an ongoing basis that it's here for you as well. The third area is the idea of career growth or creating opportunities for yourself in and out of work. And finally is daily living. How do we live into these principles on a daily basis in a way that gives us full access to the real power and potential within us? So let's go into this first area, the idea of transforming our work life. It was very clear that she's saying work does not have to feel heavy. It can be energizing. It can be creative. It can be fun. Hopefully, both she and I really model that for you. And if you don't necessarily feel that for yourself, there are two really good paraliminals that can help. One is called the new behavior generator. This really helps us establish new patterns of both thinking as well as engaging in life and in our life's work. And if for some reason you're not living that way, the first session of New Behavior Generator gives us the opportunity to look at and reframe what didn't go as well as you might have wanted it to. And the second is really modeling someone who is living it fully and being able to take on some of those inner qualities that will allow it to be expressed through you as well. The second paraliminal that can really help is called fresh start. And what this does is it lets us release any old patterns and be very present right now, recognizing that each new moment represents a fresh start to a life that you would like to live. Love that paraliminal, super powerful. The second area is this idea of engaging in this invisible source or field of energy. Robin refers to it as the quantum field. Lynn McTaggart wrote a book called The Field and another one called The Bond, and it really is about deep research that talks about how we are all part of this one field of energy moving in and through us and how we can tap into it, most importantly. So there are three paraliminals I think can help a lot. One is called the intuition amplifier that really gives you the opportunity to expand your awareness and notice some of those subtle cues and the internal guidance that can help you open to more of what's here. The second is personal genius that lets you integrate the intuition, the insight, the practical intelligence that we are referring to here, but you might not be fully living into it yet. And the third paraliminal is called belief. So if you have limiting beliefs about what's possible for you and how your healing, how your expansion, how your freedom, how your abundance can come to you, then session A in the belief paraliminal lets you shift negative or self-limiting beliefs. And session B is about living into and embodying life-enhancing beliefs that can really serve you in experiencing all of who you truly are. The third area is the area of career growth and opportunity. And this is really applying Robin's Fullistics to advancement, job search, opportunity creation, career development. Remember that this work grew out of her work of consulting in companies, working with leaders, but also helping leaders who may have lost a position to be able to go onto the job market and find something even better for themselves. So there's a lot here. The first paraliminal that I believe is best at the front end of any new development is called prosperity. And this gives us the energy, the connections, whatever it is that's necessary for us to really take that step forward, to bring in the abundance that the universe is offering. It moves us from lack or limited consciousness to a prosperity consciousness where you have access to the full abundance of the universe. The second paraliminal in this is called the new action generator. It's based on a famous quotation by Goethe that says, "He who does not the thing has not the power, but he who does the thing has the power." So it's the ability to take action, to recognize you do have the power to create this next step, this next opening for you in life. Fourth area that I think came through in my dialogue with Robin is the idea of how do we daily live with these principles so that we're embodying them and we're getting the true advantage and benefits of everything that we're talking about here. So one paraliminal really great is called self-discipline. This supports us in consistent application of new practices. So Robin had listed several things that she recommends, and it's all about, as she said, following through. So self-discipline will help you follow through on any decisions that you make for new practices that can make a difference. And the final paraliminal is called gratitude. This really cultivates a sense of receptivity and opportunity awareness. Gives us that mindset that it's here for you, and being grateful for what is coming to you in advance of having received it is a big part of what gratitude is about. Not just, oh, I'm so thankful for what I already have. It's about, thank you that all of this good is now becoming obvious and apparent to me, and I can live into it and express it through me as me on a daily basis. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed. I absolutely loved what this was all about. Put it to good use, and I'll see you on the next MINDTRX Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the paraliminal audio sessions in the MINDTRX app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and propel you toward the success you want. Go to mindtrx.com/go. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your life today. Be sure to come back for more episodes of the MINDTRX Podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. And if you found value in this episode, please be sure to subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us get the word out to more people who can benefit. Thank you again for being here on our MINDTRX Podcast.